Now I would like to invite Mr. Lennie, our keynote speaker.
We're going to take a minute to just move a microphone. Everyone can hear me fine? Okay, great. Good morning or good afternoon. Dr. Al-Talaj, colleagues, faculty, students, conference attendees, friends. I'd like to begin by thanking Bilkent University for hosting this conference and to the U.S. Embassy in Ankara for their sponsorship and their commitment to the exchange of ideas with events such as this. Additional thanks go to Ufuk Inan at the Department of Communication Design for handling all the arrangements and getting me and my colleagues here. I appreciate all of his assistance and guidance in preparation for this conference and for the very warm welcome. I'm honored to be speaking to you today. This is my first occasion to visit your beautiful country, and I'm really looking forward to meeting and engaging with you all during the conference. I'm also really happy about the opportunities I've had to eat some amazing food, and there'll be a little bit more of that. Let's see. Yep. I'll let that play in the background. I'm getting used to two hands here. There we go. So I want to first talk about my passions, and this is what I do in my life. I'm a composer for all kinds of media, film, television, video games mostly, but I've done commercials and a lot of web media, like what we call a web series, or like a television series that's sort of geared specifically for the web. I'm also a conductor, an orchestrator, an arranger. I have a music preparation company, so we do all the aspects of music production for orchestrating, preparing parts for musicians to play, every aspect of the stuff that you do to when you put a piece of music in front of a musician at a recording session and have them perform pieces. I'm also an educator. I spent several years in Los Angeles residing there, and I was teaching at the USC graduate school, composing for video games course, one of the first in the United States. And specifically for the scoring for motion pictures and television division there. I'm also teaching at UCLA Extension, and I still teach composing for games course through them, but I live in Northern California now, and so I do an online course that's available worldwide, specifically on composing for video games. So on the film credits, the music you're hearing right now is from a web series called The Watchmen motion comic, which was based on a graphic novel called The Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. The other, another web series that I started participating was called The Walking Dead. There's a TV series called The Walking Dead. It's also based on a graphic novel. And I'm playing little snippets of different music that I've written, and there'll be a couple of pieces that I'll play in their entirety, just so you can get a sense of what I do. A lot of times people hire me to write acoustic music, so it's either anything from a full orchestra to a blues band. Let's see, one of my other credits is a really bad Pamela Anderson movie. It's called Raw Justice, and so this is a little bit of that, but let's see. So on the video game side, let's see. Probably a game that I'm most known for recently is Star Wars: The Old Republic. It's a massive multiplayer online game, very similar to World of Warcraft. That's made by BioWare, and you can play the music a little louder on this. So here's an example of what we did in the Star Wars game. So this is a symphony orchestra. That's one example of something that I do. So this game was unreleased, but I had a really great opportunity to do music for a Dirty Harry video game. And that was electric rhythm section, horns, strings, things like that. So very 1970s kind of a thing. Let's see. The very first game I ever did was a symphonic score for choir and orchestra, 1999, and it was called Outcast, and it was a Belgian game developer named Appeal, and it did very well in Europe, and basically an adventure game. Yes, it's like a typical adventure game where you have to save the world. Other games that I've worked on, Magic the Gathering, which is a card type game, but this is for Xbox, a downloadable Xbox game. Dragon Shard was a Dungeon and Dragon real-time strategy type of game that Atari did. War of the Ring, based on the Lord of the Rings stories. Let's see. Other games, Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, I worked on that. Writing additional music, Snoopy and the Red Baron, Sonic and the Black Knight. So a lot of smaller titles as well as some bigger titles. Let's see. And this is also a recent game, also symphony-sized orchestra. This is Kinect Disneyland Adventures. It's a kids game for the Xbox and using the Kinect motion sensor capabilities. And it's like it's a virtual Disneyland where you can go and you can wave at Mickey and Mickey will wave back. And this is one of the pieces that I wrote for it. Very similar to Aaron Copland's Hoedown from Rodeo. that's what I do. Thanks. That was a lot of fun. We were recording at Skywalker Ranch, which is George Lucas's ranch in Northern California. He has a beautiful recording stage for orchestras there, and the middle section where the 8 woodwind players, I think I made the bassoons sweat a lot as they were trying to play that little nicka-ticka-ticka-ticka kind of part. But I want to talk a little bit about why I love scoring for games over other media, like film or television, things like that. So basically, I love the challenge, the compositional puzzle of scoring for video games. In film is a linear media where you're starting at point 1 and you end at point 2, and you control what's going to happen over a timeline, and you're synchronized to what's going on in the picture. In a video game, if you're the player, you control the performance of the music. Trying to figure out how to present the music and have it play back through the programming is just a fun compositional puzzle, and I love to be involved with the game developers in contributing to figuring out how to make the music a great experience within a video game. Let's see. The pay scale in video games is pretty respectable. It's sometimes a little better than doing small independent movies and things like that. So, and it's a little more stable than film and television. The range in compensation in film could be everything from when you're Danny Elfman or John Williams and getting $1 million per movie to somebody who says, "You will score my movie and I will give you a DVD." And so video games they are not millions of dollars, but they are, at least a steady, modest living that is pretty consistent. So I really like that. That's a good plus. And this is actually, it's actually to be as weird as I want to be. The freedom to be as weird as I want to be comes from Ashmadin, the record producer, who is Turkish. I went to college with his son Yusuf, and he would tell me stories about his father. And his father told Yusuf when he was pretty young, he told him, "Be as weird as you want to be. It's okay. It's just to explore and experiment." And it's advice that I've always taken to heart. I love that in video games there's a lot of opportunities to record with live musicians. In some ways more so than independent movies, and that's something that I really love, because my heart is always with performing compositions by live musicians, and the magic that happens and the energy that happens when you have musicians performing your pieces. I am a electric bass player, and my facility on the piano is somewhat pathetic, so to be able to render an orchestral version with just the computers, I can do it, and it sounds really great, but it takes a long time for me, and I always refer to it as something that's somewhat painful. So it's always easier for me when I can just go to a recording studio and present the music in front of musicians and let them do what they're really great at doing. The other aspect of this, I really understand the mentality of a computer programmer. My father was a great educator in the United States, and he was the first person who taught me about programming on a computer. And I didn't learn a lot of programming languages, but my very first video game that I ever did was for my father. It was an educational game. It was a mathematics game for first graders, for 6-year-old, 7-year-old children. And he wanted music that was positive reinforcement, positive rewards for when they would get the mathematics problems correct. And so I learned basic programming language, and I actually programmed, this was on a Commodore 64 computer, so way back in the day. And I think we did not have the luxury of 540 kilobytes of memory. I think we had 16. And no hard drive, we had a cassette drive for storing. But I programmed everything in BASIC, and it was all tone generators. So it's very much like the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment Systems. So it was 4-note polyphony, synthesized, and I had to basically program based on the computer clock. So all the rhythms and stuff were mathematical equations that I had to plug into the programming. So so having a background, I was like 17 years old when I did that. So and my friends were either musicians or programmers. You know, there's something in the way that I connect with people. They're either rocket scientists or they're musicians, and there is some connection with the sciences that I just really love. So so when I found the game industry, there's not very many programmers in the film industry except for those doing visual effects, and then so you know I just know how to connect with them. So when it came to the game industry and I'm meeting with game developers, I totally understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to do in the design of the programming and all that kind of stuff. So it's just something I have a love for. There's a phrase we use in America, this is where my peeps are, I mean, where my people. You know, so I feel very connected with the community of game development. The other part is that I'm a very hardcore gamer. I play games all the time, and you know, if you do play Star Wars: The Old Republic and you're on the Harbinger server, which is the West Coast server in the United States, you might find me. But I only play Sith. I'm not Republic. I think the Republic. I think they're wimps, and that the Sith are just misunderstood. So I'm gonna, let's see. This is gonna be a little tricky because I have to coordinate this between two computers. Let's see. Is it gonna trigger it? No. No. Let me see if I can. All right, so that's audio from Donkey Kong. This is that tone generator kind of thing. I'm just gonna play a couple of examples, and I think I can coordinate this. Now I'm on 3 mice over here. All right, so it gives you an example of the kind of audio that was in that. All right, so let's see if I can get this going here. No, shoot. All right, so I'm not going to be able to show much of this, unfortunately. All right, the way, because I'm running 2 PowerPoints and we had some audio things with the way I brought the wrong equipment. It's not playing the movies within the PowerPoint here. But I was going to show you a little bit of game footage, but we'll see if we can, like over some of the other sessions, be able to sort that out and so that you guys can see some footage. But what I wanted to show you was, so there's Donkey Kong, which is way back, and then Outcast was 1999, and you could see just the pixelation of the graphics here versus sort of the let me go to this sort of high graphics look of something like Star Wars: The Old Republic, and I'll get into kind of the majority of my speech, and I'll leave that up. Okay, so the early days of the game industry, they began pretty much the same as Apple Computer. It was just 2 passionate guys in a garage, if you know what I mean. And they just started their business out of a garage, built computers. In the case of game development, it's pretty much a couple of people, getting together in a small room, programming, and coming up with, in those days, like the Donkey Kong days, to create art, it was sprites engines. So we're talking about a little grid, and you would pick what the colors were, and then you would program, put this pixel in this color, and then create a little image, like you saw with the, when you see Mario and stuff like that. So over the years, game development has grown to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. Production budgets on the AAA titles these days, or what we call a AAA title, which is the highest production value, are well over $100 million just for one game. And development teams, they number in the hundreds, and sometimes even in the thousands. Some titles, like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, some of these franchises, World of Warcraft, Star Wars: The Old Republic is one example. They'll employ 300 or 500 or sometimes even over 1,000 employees just to make one game. And I think that nobody knows the exact number for Star Wars: The Old Republic, but it's been reported in the media that they suspect they spent over $150 million just to make the game. And granted, they have 1.5 million subscribers now, so I think they've made their money back. It's become this huge, gargantuan entity, the game industry. Also with these large development teams, in many cases, individual team members are very specialized in what they do, what aspect. Somebody is just painting swords. That's their job, is painting swords, and they have to paint 3,000 swords on a game or something like that. And the competition to actually work on these titles for people like myself or somebody who's a programmer or an artist is extremely fierce. Finding opportunities to break into the industry, it might seem overwhelming. And when I think about it, if I were to start my career today, how would I find a job at Electronic Arts, Ubisoft or Blizzard, with these giant companies that have 10,000 employees? Who would I contact to try and get employment there? How could I stand out? How could I be recognized for my unique skills, my talents? And another thing that I thought about is, what technologies would I need to master? And let's see, I'm going to flip here. So a lot of what I'm talking about is today is going to be about how history sometimes repeats itself. So we'll start with this sort of skills first. So this is just a list of what I consider my core skills, the things that I'm really masterful at. So my college studies were at Berklee College of Music in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. My degree is a Bachelor of Arts in Jazz Composition, but I studied theory and arranging, advanced ear training, electric bass performance, and it started with there. And actually, even before that, if I go back to when I was a child, I was writing music when I was 4 years old. I didn't write notes. I just played on a piano and said to my mom, who was writing notes for me, I would point at a note on the piano and say, "That's the one I want." And then she would write it down for me. And then when I was 11, 11 years old, that's when I was seriously learning how to be a composer, because I was taking private lessons on music theory and a little bit of piano. So it started even earlier, but a lot of the foundation of my knowledge of music and theory and harmony comes from Berklee. I also studied after Berklee privately. I studied orchestration. I studied conducting for 6 years with a wonderful man named William Kettering, who was a student of Leon Barzan, who is a New York Ballet conductor, and Arturo Toscanini, who is the NBC Radio Orchestra conductor in New York in the 1930s and 1940s. I studied for 6 years with Bill. He was 80 years old when I started studying with him, so I studied with him until he died, and he was just a wonderful mentor. I've had over 25 years of professional experience in composing and orchestration, arranging, production, music prep. Also, all the other stuff, like a lot of times when you go to a music school, like Berklee as an example, they didn't really, it was very focused on the craft of music, art, the theory, the harmony, the performance of music. A little bit of business, but not very much. But a lot of what I learned after college was about planning, personnel management, recording, running sessions, all these other things that are part of my skill set as a composer now. And I also feel I have master level knowledge of the following software: Cubase, Logic, Finale, Sibelius, Pro Tools, SoundForge was one of the audio programs I used to use a lot. Weiss, which is a audio middleware. Do people know what Weiss and Fmod are? Okay, so a few of you do. They are middleware programs, and a middleware piece of software in game development is it's just the audio programming. So for all the audio aspects of video games. So we're talking voice acting, sound design, music performance within a game. So it allows, basically these are independent software companies that made these two pieces of software. And actually I'll be showing you a little bit of Weiss on my talk with Stephen. And the thing about these tools is it allows a game developer to actually pay a small fee to use, small in the sense of it might cost $40,000 to license Fmod or Weiss in a video game for development. But if they're going to pay a programmer $80,000 a year, they might save a few dollars if they just pay that programmer to work for a week or two on finishing off the audio and use these tools to actually generate the code. So it's a time saver and a little bit of a money saver for some game development. And it's becoming not a huge part of the game industry. I'd say maybe 20-25% of video games might use these tools, maybe a little more, but there's other tools out there like the Unity engine, Unreal. So there's lots of different tools, and there's small percentages of each of these that are used. And then some companies like Bungie that made the Halo games and is now working on Destiny, they have their own in-house proprietary engines for audio that they use. So it's very common for that to be the case in game development. So this is sort of like what my base knowledge is, the skills that I have. But then the question that I have when I go back to if I was starting my career today, even if I had all this knowledge then when I started out, do any of these skills actually get me a job? And I think my answer to that is they might. Because I know Fmod and because I know Weiss, that surprises a lot of game developers. That I have a little bit of knowledge of implementation of audio into the game programming. A lot of times when they're dealing with composers or audio sound effects people, they think that that's all you know. So sometimes it's a surprise for them to know that I know a lot of these other aspects. So sometimes they get me some interest, not necessarily the job, but more than likely, I think what gets me work is my body of work, everything that I've done for the last 25 years. My reputation, the quality that I bring to a project, the skill and craft that I bring to it. More importantly, it's the relationships that I nurture with everybody in the industry. And I think it's those relationships that continue to create opportunities. A lot of times you never know where a job comes from. It sometimes comes from very unusual places. So as an example, that first game that I had done, Outgassed, it was a Belgian game developer, and this is the earlier days of the internet. So I was looking on a news group that was about film soundtracks, movie music, and it was a bunch of collectors of soundtracks. And this Belgian game developer posted a notice on the news group saying they were looking for a Hollywood composer to score a big orchestral score for their video game. And I saw that, and I had been doing movies and television, and I saw that and I said, wow, that sounds really interesting. So I sent them an email and said, I live near Hollywood. I'm 10 minutes away from Hollywood. And I said, I'm the guy, I can do this. And then they had a bunch of people do demos, and then I submitted my demos, and they really liked the music that I had done, and then they hired me and flew me to Belgium and gave me lots of Belgian chocolate. And as you can tell, my speech is mostly about food. And so we, and I got to see what they were developing and how everything was looking in the game, and then write a score. So a lot of opportunities come from very unusual places. Sometimes, let's say you have a friend who's a computer programmer, and he loves your music, and you send him your music, and he brings it to work with him and puts it on his computer, but he's working with 50 other people. And all of a sudden, the producer comes by and hears the music playing off of the programmer's computer and goes, "Wow, that's really nice. Who did that?" "No, it's my friend." And sometimes jobs come from very unusual places. So, to kind of continue on. So what do you do? What is there to do? Here you are with all of your skills that you have to date, your talent, your ambition, your goals, and here's the game industry. And it's behemoth, this giant 5-headed hydra, that's like, the Electronic Arts of the world with 10,000 employees and stuff. And I just want to say, just to kind of interject this now, this speech is supposed to be somewhat hopeful. I don't want it to be like, oh, there's this giant monster. So, we're going to go back to this idea that history repeats itself. And I have a question for you, which is, has anything happened in recent years that seems reminiscent of the early days of game development? Does anybody have an idea? No? Yes? Indie games is one. How many people know what this is? Yeah. Yes. Those that don't, this is Candy Crush Saga. And this is, let's see. This is what it sounds like. So, what this reminds me of, especially in the structure of how the music is played in the game, it reminds me a lot of something like Donkey Kong. The music is slightly, I say only slightly better quality as far as it's very lo-fi, but it's also like, the levels of sounds, it's not, it's not 4-note polyphony, it's not tone generator, but it's it's sample based, but it's still very lo-fi. And depending on what you play it on, what kind of computer you play it on, it could still sound, or like for instance, if your tablet or your iPad, your phone, whatever you're playing it on, the sound and how it sounds is, to me, very reminiscent of the early days of the game industry. So I'm going to turn this off because it's just wrong. All right. So, handheld devices, Android, Windows 8 tablets, phones. Apps. Let's see, that's going to be wrong controller. Yes. So, these kinds of games, Angry Birds, World of Tanks, Minecraft, downloadable programming, downloadable games. The question I have is, who's making these apps and downloadable games? Some of them are larger companies like Zynga, where they'll have hundreds of employees. But for the most part, it's once again down to 2 passionate guys or girls in a garage. These are extremely successful projects. Yeah, I think Minecraft was originally 1 person, right? And how many millions? 40, $50 million, something like that, of somebody just developing their passion. And this is one of the beautiful things about what's happening now. So, what does that really tell us? And for me, it just comes down to this: it's pretty much anything's possible now. Let's see. So, until recently, game industry was following what's called a sustained technology path, and there's an interesting book. It was written in 1997 called The Innovator's Dilemma, and it was written by a Harvard economics professor who talked about, he used examples from like the disk drive industry of the 1970s through the 1990s, I believe. So a sustainable path as far as technology, this is where you have a market of customers, and in the case of the game industry, we're talking, this is mostly hardcore gamers. These are people who are really passionate about video games, and they like, or they demand things like faster computers, faster processing, improved graphics or visual realism, better and more audio. They like, and things that happen within the industry, to accomplish all these things, in order to make extremely large amounts of profits, they would put together a larger development team so they could, like an example, John Madden football is usually a team of 300 or more people developing a game, but they only develop it in a 6-month window. So it's not like, a lot of games are 2 to 3, sometimes more years to develop one title. But for certain sports titles like John Madden football, it's a very short schedule, but they put a lot of people on it, and very specialized kinds of tasks. So larger teams, there's higher production costs, and also higher pressure for the big companies like Activision or Electronic Arts to sell millions of units to maximize their profitability. And one example of that is the Lara Croft game that came out this last year. Wonderful looking game, beautifully done, really well done, large production team. They sold 4 million copies. And for most people in the game industry, that is a huge success. But for the publisher, they called it a failure because their projection was for, like 10 million copies or something like that. And, if they're putting in $100 million, they're looking at, they need to sell so many units in order to call it a success. So in some ways, it's sort of a very sad fact of the game development right now, at least what I call the traditional game industry. It's very much like the movie industry and what they call a tentpole movie. Has people heard this phrase before? Tentpole? So a tentpole for a movie company is the big summer movie, the action movie that people will, spend $500 million to go watch, like a movie like Avatar that had like $1 billion in box office. That's a tentpole, because what that does is that movie makes so much money, and that's why they spend $200 or $300 million making a movie like that, because the movie will make so much profit that it pays for all of the smaller movies that don't do so well. And in game development, that aspect has been happening. So in addition to this, currently we're also seeing what's called a disruptive technology emerge. And let's see. So, that's more the handhelds in my mind. And what's, like when I talked about the traditional game industry of having a particular customer base of these sort of hardcore gamers that expect certain level of quality, of production value, that kind of thing. On the handheld apps, downloadable content, generally those are made with a fairly low production cost. They're sold for fairly cheap. Angry Birds is $4 or something like that, versus $60 for Call of Duty, in US dollars. The not so great performance, not so great audio quality, not so great video quality, but all at a very cheap price. And it's a completely new customer base. It's not the hardcore gamer, it's the casual gamer. It's my wife, who is, I call her a hardcore gamer, but she's hardcore on Mahjong. That's her game. She likes a puzzle game. I'll be playing Star Wars The Old Republic, but she will be playing Mahjong. And she will play it all day long, as much hours as I put into my gaming, she does with hers. So that's a whole new market, and those people are happy, playing a Facebook game or playing Words with Friends or whatever. So now we've got two related industries. Number one, the established game industry, where developers create a boxed title that's going to be played on high-end PC computers, Xboxes, PlayStations, Wii's, with mid-level to high-level productions, dollars and budgets and production quality. And on the other, number two, the emerging app and downloadable game industry where small independents are creating content with low production costs for a completely different customer base. And for me, that's really promising. And why? Because it's a whole new generation of talent. It's a wealth of opportunities for all of us. So who of you will be creating or participating in the next Angry Birds or Minecraft or the next Halo? It's a lot of times, just like in the established game industry, the people who made, Donkey Kong, they're still around. They're really old. They're 50. Which is my age. They're still around and they're still making games. Guys like Tim Schafer, who made games like, he used to be at LucasArts way long time ago, and now he has his own company called Double Fine. There's all these really talented guys that have been around for a long time, but there's a lot of new talent, like the guys that made Minecraft, or even the Candy Crush Sagas or the Angry Birds. Angry Birds is a very clever game, very clever. Steven here was telling me about just the sound design and how there's actually no music in the game. And I was checking it out last night for the first time because I'm a hardcore gamer, right? It's like I'm Star Wars, the Old Republic kind of guy versus the Angry Birds guy. But it was really entertaining and the sound is really nice. So who of you will be creating these next projects? And what you learn from doing these small-scale projects, you bring with you throughout your whole career. What I did as a musician playing in bands when I first got out of college to what I do now as a composer, it all informs my art. And so what I encourage you guys to do is just follow your passions and look for or create your own new markets and new technologies and new art forms. And we're living in an extremely connected world now, and with that connectivity comes opportunity. And I want you to just, I want to just say thank you guys for attending today, and that's pretty much everything I have for the morning, and enjoy the conference. So I take it we might have time if people have questions. So I just want to open it up and, raise your hand or, okay, yes.
Yeah. What can you tell about the pitching process when you want to get a job in music?
So what can you tell about the pitching process when you want to get a job in music? The first thing to figure out is who do you want to pitch to? And so, it's kind of like what I mentioned before. Sometimes it's just you have a friend who's a computer programmer, and your pitch is, "Hey, I just came up with I have a new CD out. Here's a thumb drive with my music," and then somebody else pitches for you because he's working at a place where they hear your music. So sometimes it's something like that. Sometimes it's in the game industry. There's several people within a game development company. One, the most central person for audio is what they call the audio director. The key is to look at what kind of company would you like to work for. So if you want to work for BioWare, right, and then or whatever company it is, then do some research and go on the internet and look at whatever you can to find out who is the audio director at BioWare. Other people would be who are the producers. So as far as the structure, there's the individual people that are working on the components of the game, the programmers, the artists, but then above them are the managerial people. So an audio director is in charge of all of the audio for the whole game. So voiceover, sound design, and music, right? So that person reports to the producers who control the funds and also the planning of the resources. And so sometimes it's that. Sometimes you're talking to the president of the game developing company, so it depends on how big the company is. And like an example is there's some games that I've worked on, like the War of the Ring game. I pitched to the president of the company because he It was actually two partners, the president and vice president. The vice president was the lead programmer, and the president was sort of the lead creative visionary for the, so he had the concept of what he wanted to create, and he was the passionate guy. And then, so I just talked to them, versus talking to a producer or an audio director, So it varies on each project, and you might hear me say this a lot through the conference. The one phrase that is very frustrating for people to hear is when they ask me a question and I say, well, it depends, But it really does. It's different with every company. So find out which companies you really, like if you're a gamer and you like certain products like BioWare, go find out who works there. And so that's one way. And send them an email and say hello and say, here's my SoundCloud page, A lot of times, there's a couple things about pitching that have changed over the years. So it used to be when I wanted to pitch my music, I would bring an actual physical CD to give to them, and they would listen to it. These days, I haven't made a CD in a couple of years because the audio directors are like, send me an email and give me a web link to your SoundCloud page, or give me a thumb drive, or something like that. So it's changed a lot. So it's more about the communication with the person first. Find out how they'd like to hear your music. If they want you to just send them a link to your website or to your SoundCloud page or something like that, or if you have a band and they're local, just say, we're playing on the weekend, come to this bar and we'll be there. So you have to kind of make it an individual effort with each potential client. And the other thing is just, I think, talk about what you love doing every day. And really do your homework with the client. If you love BioWare games, find out what games they have in development. Usually if they've announced a game, they've already picked a composer, but they may have 5 other games in development that they haven't announced on their website yet. So just find out what they're looking for and show them what you love to do every day. If you like to write, strictly a particular style of music, I'm an electronic artist. I do stuff that sounds like 9 Inch Nails or something like that. Then they're like, okay, great. We have a game we're doing that might need that. So, just do as much research as you can and just reach out and put your music out there on the web so people can listen to it and just communicate to as many people as you can. The other thing I would say is, if there's conferences like this is a great way to meet new people. And in the United States, we have the Game Developer Conference that is every year in San Francisco, which is basically 20,000 game developers from all over the world, and every aspect, every discipline. We're talking programmers, producers, business people, audio people, and we get together for a week, and we hang out together, and we share ideas like we're doing here at this conference, and it's a great way to meet people. So attend as many events and conferences as you can. It's hard when you're an audio person because, for me as a musician, the natural state is to hide in my room and practice, and versus going out into the world where everybody else is and talking with them. But, what I've learned so far of the Turkish culture, it's very important to you to socialize and to be around people. So you have an advantage over a lot of Americans because of that. So hopefully that answers most of what you were looking for. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Peter. I'm a sound engineer.
Yes.
Well, I was kind of lucky because I received a job from a translating agency in Istanbul, and I recorded the background sound effects for Assassin's Creed Revelations because the game had background sound effects because the game is in Constantinople, Istanbul.
Yes.
I just had a chance to record background sound effects like people walala sounds, people speaking in the
Yes.
background in the bazaar, etc.
Yeah.
So I was just lucky to be in this project somehow.
Yes.
This was just tiny little bit of this game.
Yes.
But how much do you think the location of the person who is just supposed to work for a project like this has to be in the same country, same city with the game developers?
It's
And do we have any chance to work on, from a distance?
Congratulations on a huge title to be involved in. Of course.
very tiny bit. You
Yes.
don't even exist.
Oh, but own it, own it. I worked on Assassin's Creed. That's just take it all. So, no, like I mentioned before about the globalization of and the interconnectivity of the way the world is right now. There's two things. You don't have to be, it's, excuse me. You have some advantages because in the context of that project, they wanted something that was a local service that you could provide as far as being able to get Walla and things that were very authentic for this region. But your skill level of being a sound engineer is a universal skill set. So it's something where you can take something like a major worldwide credit like that and transport that just by communicating it on something as simple as your website or getting some nice write-ups in things like Mix Magazine, So, and feel free to submit to them and say, yes, I did, localization, or I did some ambiances and Walla and stuff like that for this game, and recorded it all here in Turkey and all that kind of stuff. So that's some of the part that's a little outside a lot of our skill set as artists is the business part of promoting. So to me, it's like you are in a great position to go global from that credit, and then it's just about how to translate that credit to getting the word out there that you were involved with that, because there may be other game developers that are like, wow, that was really authentic sounding and really beautiful recorded material in that game. Who did that? And then all of a sudden you're working for Ubisoft in France, and you're doing stuff for EA in the UK or Sony. I would just say do whatever you can to promote all of your credits and the level of work that you do in as global a way as possible. And some of that may be traveling and going to places like the Game Developer Conference and just meeting people there. But some of it is just trying to find ways to translate that, whether it's through Facebook or social media. There's a lot more tools available, I think, to us now. Just the fact that I have a Facebook page, and I have enough people following me on the Facebook page I can make an announcement, because I made an announcement on my Facebook page, which you saw, that I was going to be in Turkey at this conference and stuff like that. And I had one of my former students from UCLA is, I am Turkish, and if you need any questions answered, contact me. Or you had people, chiming in saying how wonderful it was to do this event. So, I just say, just reach out as far as you can, and translate that beautiful credit and the level of work that you do, the professional level of work that you do, put it out there as wide as you can, and I think that might help. It's not a restrictive thing to live in a country. As a comparison, I lived in Los Angeles for over 20 years, and initially I wanted to be a composer for film or television until I fell in love with the video game industry. And I wanted to do that more. And I moved to Northern California, near San Francisco, which is, it used to be that if you wanted to be a composer for film, you had to live in Los Angeles, because that's where the productions were happening. But now, even film companies, they're not necessarily shooting in Los Angeles. They're not shooting their production in Los Angeles. They shoot all over the world. They post, a lot of times you might have a film that is a TV show in Los Angeles, but they do all their post-production at Skywalker Sound in Northern California. I found I didn't have to live in Los Angeles anymore. And I moved and my wife and I, we wanted to have some acreage, some land, so that we could have a small farm. In addition to me composing, we'd have a few animals, because my wife, she is a veterinary doctor, an animal doctor, and she loves goats. And she doesn't like goat cheese as much as she likes sheep cheese, but so she wants to have some goats and some sheep and make cheese and do her fine art. And so we were looking for a place that had some property. So you're not going to find that in Los Angeles. So I can live anywhere now. It doesn't matter where I live, and my clients are global clients. they hire me from all over the place. So I just want to encourage you to just keep doing the great work that you do, and just get notice out there in any way possible, whether it's Facebook or on your website or through write-ups in trades like the mix magazines of the world. You know, feel free, submit to them and say, hey, this is what we've been doing. You know, and
I'm gonna be a spammer.
yes, create your own little empire. You know, yeah. So I